Good afternoon and welcome to the last session of our fifth Streaming Media Connect. I am going to miss our producer, Stephen Nathans-Kelly, playing DJ and surprising us with the intro music when this is all over. Thanks to him for all the help. And thanks to all the speakers and attendees who have joined us this week at, as I said, our fifth virtual event. It's been great to be able to keep the conversation going while we haven't been able to meet in person. We are planning on meeting in person. In November, we've got the program for Streaming Media West online. Steve can pop the link to that in the chat and you can check it out. We are going to be adding speakers in the next week, so look for that as well. Before we jump into a discussion about the future of OTT, a few housekeeping notes. You'll notice that live transcripts are likely turned on for you. Sometimes they don't come on for everybody. If you want to turn them off, you can go to the bottom of your screen, click on live transcript and click hide subtitle. Also, the chat will be open, but please use the Q&A tab to submit your questions for our panelists. As those questions come in, I will relay them to our moderator, who will ask the panel those questions as they come in. Finally, we are giving away a $50 Amazon gift card, as we have at all of our sessions. You have to be present to win, though, so we'll be drawing a name at random at the end of the panel and announcing the winner before we sign off. I'd like to thank our diamond sponsor for all of Streaming Media Connect, Limelight Networks. Thank you very much to Limelight for helping us bring all of these sessions to you this week. I think this is our 14th session, and you can check out more about Limelight Networks at their URL, so handily displayed on their slide. I'd also like to thank the sponsor of this panel, and that's Brightcove. And Mike Green from Brightcove will be joining this discussion on the future of OTT. And that really wraps it up for me in my notes. So I'd like to pass the mic over to our moderator, Allan McLennan. Welcome, Allan. And I'd like to ask our panelists to turn their cameras on and join us as well. How you doing, Allan?
I'm doing good, thanks, Eric. It's nice to be here on a beautiful day where everybody's at. I hope the weather is to your liking. This is a really interesting conversation I'm looking forward to today. Like anything else, having a little vision work, predicting the future, it's always can be a little suspect, but at the same time, when you're dealing with and you're listening to individuals that are experts in the area and have direct involvement on the direction that we're going to be headed, it makes a lot of sense to really be able to understand and get a better grasp on what we might be in for over the course of the next year, if not two. With that, there's many different areas we're going to be reviewing with technology, devices, audiences, behavior, and also just have we really changed that much? It started out in subscription. It started out with a whole new distribution platform. And now we're coming back into FAST, which is free advertising streaming television. And in the course of that, is that really going to be just what we always had? So I wanted to open up the conversation with this, and I'm going to ask each of our participants and panelists to give a little bit of background and introduction of themselves. And so with that, let me just call out the panel first, and then I'll go to each of you individually. We are fortunate to have Lauren Devillier, the CEO and co-founder of Struum, Brett Sappington, the VP of Interpret, Jeff Clanagan, the CEO of Laugh Out Loud, Mike Green, the VP of Product Marketing with Brightcove, and Kevin Shepela, the EVP and CCO of Fandango. Lauren, could you give us a little bit of a background on you and why you're here at the table today?
Sure. So I have been in the streaming business and the SVOD business since I started at Microsoft many, many years ago, working on the original IPTV business up in Seattle. And from there, I was recruited to Disney and oversaw digital strategy, which included our TV Everywhere products, and also worked on the Disney Plus portfolio. And then also at Discovery, I built and launched an SVOD platform where actually we work closely with Brightcove for international distribution. So I've been in this industry for many, many years, and excited to talk about our new venture, Struum, which is also another SVOD platform, but different.
But different, and that's what we
But
want to
different.
get.
Yes.
Very much so. Brett, we've known each other for many years.
We have an
You're-
embarrassing number of years, actually.
Tell us a little bit about your background. What's going on, and what are your insights here?
You bet. So Brett Sappington, Vice President of Interpret. Interpret's a market research and consulting firm based in LA, but with offices all over. I've been an industry analyst in the television and video entertainment industry for many years, back since the words TV everywhere actually meant something. And so have been following the industry for many, many years. Now at Interpret, I'm leading our push into syndicated research as we try and figure out what's going on around this market and how to keep up with it.
That's a task in of itself, is trying to figure out what's going on. Jeff Clanagan, CEO of Laugh Out Loud. Tell us about yourself.
So I've been in the business for 25 years. I was actually started on the distribution side, direct to consumer. I was actually one of the first companies to actually distribute video directly to the consumer from a retail standpoint, when the studios were still in the blockbuster Hollywood rental model. So I've been in the direct to consumer business. And for me, it's just, this is just, as we've seen the business evolve, obviously digital. I've been a partner with Kevin Hart 12 years ago, and we have a streaming platform, which is or a fast channel, which is Laugh Out Loud, and we're actually launching other niche targeted fast networks. So this is, for me, is just, I started in the direct consumer, and this is, going from VHS to DVD now to OTT. So it's, for me, it's all about how do I get product to the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we could all share that
Exactly.
evolution as where things are going in the period. Mike, thank you for sponsoring this panel. But Mike Green with Brightcove. Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Allan. It's a pleasure to be here. And Brightcove is always happy to support streaming media and help, get these discussions and important information to the folks who are making this industry happen and push it forward. So obviously exciting that Brightcove has been at the forefront of that push for a long time. For me, I was on the kind of content owner side of things for a good portion of my career at AOL and at Comcast, where I was a colleague of Kevin's in a roundabout way, but working on the early Xfinity TV apps and the way that Comcast brought video over IP in a lot of different ways, including some nascent OTT services. But I've been Brightcove now for about 7+ years, and now in our strategic development group or in corporate development, working with a lot of the ecosystem that helps bring solutions together for our customers. A lot of them being OTT services, ranging from from broadcasters and content and fan brands to sports teams and leagues. It's a really exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll get to that. Kevin, tell us about yourself and Fandango.
Hey, Allan, thanks for having me. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Fandango and have responsibilities over the transactional business, and been with the business for about 12+ years at this point in time. And I'll go way back to the mean streets of Cupertino to talk about kind of where I got my interest in where I'm sitting today. I grew up in Cupertino. I grew up around technologists and the early days of Silicon Valley, and ended up migrating down to Los Angeles to go to UCLA, and found myself being exposed to the entertainment community during that time there. And really from that point forward, wanted to figure out a way to marry technology and entertainment. And for the last 2+ decades, I've been doing that very thing, all from the early days of postage size, video and really poorly compressed audio streams to delivering full features over, ISDN and really bad DSL lines to where I stand today with a pretty diverse business that participates in a lot of different spots within the deciding, buying, and transacting universe for our consumer. On the Rotten Tomatoes side, with a with not only the brand itself, but also, you know, as an AVOD provider. We just announced it earlier this week, a distribution deal with Samsung, a Voodoo business that we have both AVOD and TVOD, and then a really important part of that transaction funnel and the movie ecosystem, Fandango ticketing, as the kind of leader in the ticketing space for theatrical.
Yeah, that's that's a lot of activity. In fact, you know, you really touch on a number of aspects of the evolution of media engagement with audiences when we go back to, even with some of you, at least with myself, a little bit Pavlovian response when I hear an octave of, you know, as far as how we used to connect at 14.4 with gaming and, you know, different types of streaming, and how this has evolved now to really become kind of second nature for all of our audiences, and especially for the teenagers and younger, that you know, this is just the way it is, and it's on multiple screens at multiple times with different types of engagement. And I think that comes down to, I'll just kick it off, since Kevin, you kind of opened up the door there a little bit, is transactional video still a viable entity in the market versus subscription, or versus, as we started to talk about with AVOD, with what Jeff had mentioned with FAST. So let's just talk about transactional video, because it's expensive comparatively, and it's also, you know, is this a complement to OTT, or is this, do you see that this is going to be a major player as we move forward?
Yeah, I think we really look at the consumer, and we look at them from a perspective of having a digital diet. And I think that diet consists of multiple forms of content and means of actually looking at that content. And as a result, we have transactional that is very much complementary to SVOD. I think if you go back to, you know, we've talked about before, you know, are we eventually just repackaging SVOD as to what we had before? Cable, a traditional cable, is a subscription. There is a transactional component that always lived with that. There was a transactional component that was physical and digital that have lived with that. And I think that, you know, all the research that I've seen is plus 50% crossover of SVOD and TVOD consumers. And so there's a behavior that will always exist, where transactional video will be viable for those folks that don't want to participate in a recurring billing relationship with a provider, or that simply have subscription fatigue.
Well, I was just going to jump in, like what you know, you can also see that with the strategy that Disney Plus is doing right now, right? With, you know, they've got the subscription, and then they have the sort of the add-on movies that you can watch for a premium price, but you have to have the subscription to watch the movie. So I agree with you, Kevin. I think they work together well. I don't think one will supersede the other. I think that they will definitely sort of, I think there'll be a lot more experimentation along the way.
Yeah, I think we're still in a very fluid environment right now. We can all agree. And I like to use the comparison that, you know, I think a lot of us have gotten hooked on subscription meal plans and delivery to food to the home, but it doesn't mean we go to the grocery store to buy individual ingredients for a one-off meal. It's still going to be part of the way that we consume content. There's going to be a stream of things that come to us, and then there's going to be things that we explicitly go out and get.
No question about it, because, you know, Amazon has been testing out that for some time, as far as, you know, having that more of a transactional component right at the very top end of what you want to watch, any new releases that they have of themselves. You know, I want to go to Jeff real quick. You know, your experience coming from, you know, the evolution of this activity, moving from VHS all the way through to today with, in some ways, niche programming. Are you seeing this as well? Are you seeing pay-per-view popular, or are you working with the subscription component?
Well, right now we're working with a free component. We are going to launch a subscription component. I do agree with transaction to be complementary, but the caveat is that there's so much free content across OTT and social that the content has to be premium. There has to be a reason to make the transaction. And I do see some channels out there or content makers putting stuff behind a paywall, and the content is not necessarily premium. And the Disney Plus, which is a good example, that's very premium content, usually slated for theatrical, but you have to be careful in terms of what is the consumer going to pay for, because there's so many choices out there from a content standpoint.
Yeah, and from a building standpoint too, and I want to just ask Mike real quick, and Brett, I've got some questions coming up for you. Are you starting to see that component within the builds that you're currently doing and working with customers right now? Is it all pretty much an SVOD, or is it moving more towards the fast component? What are you seeing from a build?
I think that the experimentation point that Lauren and Kevin were getting at is very valid. And especially as you've seen the leaders who've got deep technical resources doing things like Hulu was early in doing the, I think it was $10 a month for the same service with no ads, $5 with ads, that type of hybrid experimentation a couple of years ago. Then every service wanted to offer that. It wasn't enough to just offer a simple all you can eat $10 SVOD package. People really wanted to evolve their packaging and pricing, and the technical complexity that comes with different experimentation, offering a Bleacher Report when they were doing the match, the Tiger Woods big pay-per-view event inside an experience that had a combination of AVOD and SVOD Champions League stuff. Everybody wants to be able to try those things to make that work across kind of all the technologies and user experience across all the platforms. That can be pretty demanding. But that's where, we like seeing the innovation, because that makes for an interesting problem set, and it makes for consumer choice and the ability for the content owners to deliver business value on the terms that the consumers are looking for. And I think that the next step past that is quickly trying to figure out what is or isn't working, and having the proper hooks to pull back data and analytics to evolve your strategy and not be overcommitting to supporting too many types of experiences.
Like what you just said is like opening up kind of a little Pandora's box, because the amount of viewers, the audiences are growing, the models are changing. We're starting to, like Kevin's offering a free service. It's just exploding with popularity as far as the kind of engagement is there, and new types of models, which we'll get to, Lauren, when it comes to Struum. But Brett, give us a little grounding here. Where have we been, and where do you see things are going in this category?
Yeah, I think an interesting thing about this is each of these models scratches a particular itch, and not just for the consumer. There's certainly that from the consumer side. So whether it's first run release movies and people wanting to see them as quickly as possible, compared with wanting to have content constantly given to them, which would be fast or something like that, or paying for a bundle of services, or just a subscription service. So each of those models evolves and is successful because it addresses a very specific need for consumers. And one of the things we're seeing from consumers is they don't have just one need. They have a variety of needs. And so all of the different models essentially create this portfolio. And we talk about it all the time in the industry, that there's a portfolio of services that consumers are using. And what's happening that we're seeing in the market now is consumers' portfolio is evolving. So originally it was a lot of subscription and just a little bit of ad-based services. Now it's a much wider variety. So it's some subscription, it's some ad-based, it's a little bit of transactional, it's a little bit of PVOD, premium video on demand, which is what we were talking about with Disney Plus. So we have all, and fast is another. It's another use case, another way that they can consume content. And that way, consuming content maybe without having to make the decision of, well, what do I watch next? So we're seeing from the consumer side, because habits are changing, they're changing because of the availability of content, and also consumers' willingness to spend more time watching video, particularly over the last year.
So you just described something that looks like the ultimate offering. It's mostly free with ad support, a different tier that's subscription based, and then if there's an interest to top run pay-per-view, it's a component that then you can capture and retain your viewers, because right at the moment churn is a very high problem, with a big problem when it comes to most of the OTT services. Lauren, you've really kind of delved into this, and Struum has identified this opportunity in being able to offer to the viewer a very open-ended type of engagement. Tell us about Struum.
Yeah, so Struum is a platform that allows viewers access to thousands of shows and movies. Right now, we have 30 plus services on our platform. By October, we'll have over 60. We just added BBC Select. And consumers, customers can access Struum with a single monthly subscription. And so, what we see, when we're looking at the research, and what we see that a consumer is looking for is to kind of simplify their streaming experience and give them, one-stop shopping, one credit card to access many different services. So we offer a wide variety of programming, from documentaries to indie flicks, to films, to true crime, to LGBTQ content, with that single subscription. And so our thesis is that, people generally go into these services and they kind of dip in and dip out of these different services. And one of the things that we see in the research is that people will come in, they'll do the free trial, they'll binge what they're watching, and either they mark their calendar to get out of their, to sort of end their free trial, or they forget that they've had that subscription. Like that happened to me with The Big Bang Theory. My daughter wanted to watch like season 7 of The Big Bang Theory, and I ended up paying like $75 for it once I realized how long I'd had the subscription. And so then they forget, and then you get frustrated.
You should have rented it on Vudu. It would have been cheaper.
Right. Exactly. So the problem that we're solving is we're allowing the subscriber to come in. We have that one monthly subscription. We give them credits, and they can sort of dip in and dip out of all the shows that they want to watch across these 60 plus services. So they can access what they want to watch and watch what they want to watch, using credits. So that's what we see as a problem that we're solving. And we are, we're an aggregator, much like others are an aggregator.
Yeah,
I think the important thing that you just mentioned, Lauren, is the dipping in and dipping out. It's real evidence of consumers are chasing content.
That's right.
It's more than the business model. They are looking for the content that they want to watch, and they may endure a business model, but they don't love business models. They love content, and so they will go where the content is.
Well, I want to go to Jeff a little. Go and talk a little bit about your free service. How's your audience growing? How are things going with what you're currently offering with Laugh Out Loud? Because the kind of humor that you deliver really great content. And there's some pretty funny times I've dipped in with you. But so it's is that a viable offering that you have, or are you starting to look at how you can expand that too? You mentioned that you wanted to go to subscription. But, how is this going to move for you? Are you looking at having one subscription and then being able to have access to everything in this capacity?
So the model for us has been very successful, but I probably had a little bit of an advantage more than other channels. I got Kevin Hart, who's the biggest comedian in the world, with a social media following of 100 million. So we're able to kind of just press buttons like from day one, literally, and traffic's going to the channel. So I have a little bit of a different offering with what we have with Kevin's Social. Plus we have other social media platforms that we had curated and been working on for the last 10 or 15 years. So we kind of came in with an audience already. Now we're starting to serve that audience. And it's literally been growing. I mean, if you think about additionally what we've been doing with some of our partners, because in addition to our FAST channel, we have a production company. So we have our channel, but we're also producing content for our partners. So for example, Die Hard, which was originally with Quibi, then went to Roku. Well, we hit that button and all of a sudden it's the most watched series on the Roku channel. We just did this with Peacock, who's also a partner for us with the Olympic show with Kevin Hart and Snoop, that just really blew everything open for them. They had never had
pretty good.
that kind of publicity. So I'm in a little bit of a different, situation because it is Kevin and because we actually produce content. So we're seeing huge growth in terms of viewership, hours, and in retention, people watching shows, because where we do have library content, we're producing a lot of original content. So we have our library content to kind of, fill our hours, but we're producing originals and we're very active on the marketing. Now, with that said is that, okay, our channel, we're on Roku, we're on Pluto, we're on Peacock, we're on Tubi. I don't completely own that audience. So now what we're going through is like we've kind of curated this audience on these platforms. Now we have to get ownership of the audience, which is the reason
Sure.
we will go to a subscription, or we were beta testing our app right now, but now I need to get ownership of my audience, and that's kind of where we're at in our growth trajectory with the channel.
Right, and I can see what you're trying to do when it comes to the subscription component, because then you can have a stable sort of revenue flow into the company. But from a reach with the size of audience, have you been predominantly? I mean, it's just a silly question here. You have been advertising centric, and you have been offering that to your audience. Has that been embraced? Has that been something that they're comfortable with as far as like serving up advertising on the front and the end? How's that been for you?
Well, the interesting thing for us, we also have a branded entertainment division. So we actually have shows like our sports show, Coldest Balls, is with Kevin interview, where we have Old Spice as our partner. So we actually have brand relationships that we actually brought into the mix also. So when we came to our partners, like let's say Pluto and Tubi, we're actually coming in with brand partnerships. So we're in it's a kind of a unique situation for the channel. So we immediately bring in advertising dollars day one, which is why, we obviously needed to be able to have the ability to sell our own inventory, because we're bringing partnerships. So we're bringing a lot more to the table from a channel standpoint with advertising partners, with original programming, but also this huge marketing push to be able to drive people to the channels.
Mm-hmm. May I ask, give me a ballpark as far as your audience size is concerned? Overall, what is how many viewers do you have on a daily or monthly basis?
That's an interesting question, and it's a data question. So here's one of the frustrations in a fast channel is that my dashboard on Tubi just gives me impressions and revenue, which is great because I can see the revenue every day, right? I can't tell you how big my audience is on Tubi. I can tell you I'm generating money and we're getting impressions, but I can't. Now, if you go to my Pluto dashboard, I can tell you what my audience is on a daily, I can tell you on a monthly, I can tell you how many minutes they're watching. I go to my Roku dashboard, well, it's giving me rankings and stuff like that. Like every dashboard is different. And that's probably the biggest frustration for me. So I can't tell you how many people. I can tell you, last year when we were still building, we did over 3 billion minutes of viewing time. But I can tell you on Pluto to the point exactly how many viewers we have. But I can't tell you necessarily overall. I can give you some, estimates and subject. But I know over on Mike, I don't know if you have any input on this, but every platform, the way they're reporting, like with Pluto, I mean, even like with Peacock, revenue, I can't tell you how many numbers are.
Jeff, do you get more information back than if you had made the same channel and sent it off to Comcast in the old model?
There you go. So but
I'm curious, do you program the same? Do you program the same virtual channel for all of those fast partner platforms?
No, we have a channel, but I don't have our content on every platform.
Yeah, so that's where it gets interesting, is picking, and especially as you start having this greater direct to consumer relationship of your own, what you choose to put where, your windowing strategy and your programming and licensing strategy.
Exactly, and a lot of it is I'm going to put my premium content where I'm seeing the most engagement and generating the most revenue. So I kind of keep that on my premium channels. But it's difficult because, and I'm sure this will be resolved at some point, is the way there's no uniform reporting across all these platforms.
Yeah, no.
Go ahead, Lauren.
I'm sorry. I was just going to pick up on something that Jeff said earlier in the conversation was, I would say that what we are seeing with the content partnerships that we're doing, we have some straight AVOD services that are experimenting with SVOD on our platform. So the idea that people, that Jeff is experimenting, like everybody's sort of experimenting to see like what works, what hits, what drives the most revenue, where do you get your, how do you get your reporting? I mean, for us in really doing deals with the sort of medium to the long tail of content providers, what we're opening this opportunity of expanding sort of the distribution pie for them, right? And to be able to experiment on our platform as they're experimenting on other platforms. So I totally can relate to like where Jeff is at in terms of, right now we have fast channels. It's hard to get the data. We're looking at SVOD. Like we are talking to a lot of content partners that are in that sort of similar space.
And you're an aggregator. You're basically pulling this in for a subscription fee and then being able to portion out that kind of viewing for credits. And that is a very interesting model to be in and of itself, identifying your audience and seeing what their consumption patterns are.
Yeah, we're ingesting all of the content onto our platform. So we are not, while we are aggregating, we're also the service, right? We're not sort of sending people out to get those subscriptions. They come to our platform. We are mirroring libraries on our service that people can, as I said, like kind of dive in and dive out of and experiment with that content. And if we convert them to a subscription, then, it's a great opportunity for a lot of these sort of aspirational tier ones, from the medium into the long tail, the content provider.
Yeah, it's going down that path. I want to jump over to Kevin. You just announced in the last couple of weeks you've become basically Roku's store, and being able to provide this content. How's that been going? How's been the take rate of programming of TVOD?
Yeah, it's actually been great. And just to clarify, we've actually been a integrated partner with Roku for a number of years on the Fandango Now brand. And as we integrated both Fandango Now and Vudu became the prominent brand that we integrated even more deeply with Roku. Look, there's a healthy appetite for TVOD in all of these different platforms and within each ecosystem. I mean, Lauren touched on it earlier with the appetite that's being filled within Disney Plus in SVOD environments. There's an opportunity for a consumer to engage with not only Disney Plus and Peacock and all the different SVODs on Roku, but choice and optionality, leads them to TVOD and being integrated into their left rail and being a very close technical partner of them allows us to deliver that best experience to the consumer. It's integrated with search and it's highly accessible to the consumer.
Now, in that, let's just stay with within Roku. Jeff brought up the fact of the Quibi, content that's out there. The vast amounts of content just to find what's available within Roku. Is that an area that you're seeing to be more attractive for the viewer coming in? It's like they're coming to you and finding that kind of content?
Yeah, I think they're coming to us. I mean, when it comes to deciding and buying, we certainly sit at two different parts of that equation. One is deciding and buying in the physical world and in theatrical, and in the digital world, our brand Rotten Tomatoes is really a part of that zeitgeist and part of that conversation around pointing people to the content that they want. And to my earlier point, we have 200 plus hours of content that we distribute through Roku, Zumo, Peacock, and just as of this week, Samsung. So I think there's a big appetite for consumers looking for content to tell them what content to watch.
Yeah,
diversity and how fragmented the ecosystem is at the moment.
Yeah, it's like for all of us on this panel, it kind of takes it back because Jeff brought it up when it came to VHS. I was the founding president of Rentrack and the AMI division, and the AMI division was looking at all of this content and the evolution from VHS to DVD to digital. And you know what? Not a lot of difference as far as consumption behavior and patterns. People going to the stores, looking on the shelves, what is on special, where it's at, how do I get it, when do I return it? These kinds of behaviors are well established. Brett, looking at that a little bit, because we're starting to hone in a little bit potentially on what the future of what OTT may be from platform to behavior. What are you seeing from a behavior standpoint of the consumer?
Well, from a consumer standpoint, there are a few things we're seeing. One of those is that really one of the things that Lauren mentioned, the idea of this, people getting interested in and aggregating things and the diversity of different services and having to find a way to navigate all of that. One of the things we've seen is whenever there were just a few dominant services, there wasn't as much demand for everything being pulled together. Yes, everyone wanted to search across different things and to know where it was. But today, managing accounts, managing logins, managing, as she said, when things renew, all of those things like that. Now that you have a wide of many services and really good quality original content on many of them, as consumers are now chasing all of this content, managing that is much more difficult. So we're seeing greater frustration among consumers in terms of dealing with all of that. So that's one thing on the consumer side that we're looking at in terms of what's happening with aggregation. There are two things I wanted to point out kind of on the industry side, both of them that Jeff mentioned, which I think are really interesting. One of those is sponsor-driven content creation. So the idea that Old Spice is coming in and paying for a stream. So they're essentially buying that. That's back to the old days of original broadcast TV, when this show is brought to you by Barbasol or whatever it happened to be back then. And so that's really fascinating that that model is now coming back here. The other thing that he mentioned was having a channel, a fast channel, but you have different content for that branded channel potentially on different services. I mean, typically in the past, when you have a brand for your service, that is the same channel everywhere you go. When you go to Comcast, you go to Cox, you go to Verizon, you have the same channel. The ability now for every service to have a slightly unique offering like that, that's really different. That's almost a different level of fragmentation than we've seen before.
I'd love to throw out a couple of examples of the trends that Brett has been talking about. As you're speaking, I was thinking of certain customers. We mentioned just as the call was getting started before we joined the audience, Reverie, who's a really forward-thinking LGBTQ programmed OTT service. And they have, I think, 6 or so that I can think of their sort of virtual channels, linear created channels, where it started with just, their LGBTQ long form movies and so forth. But then they made Reverie News, and they made, I think, a Reverie Latino focused channel, and they distribute all those through the FAST relationships that they've created, and then they of course kind of curate them in their own OTT worlds. And in those OTT worlds, I saw they just did a thing, Pride Month by Xfinity, right, where they sold a kind of content package or placement to a big brand sponsor in Comcast, with Xfinity, which was very clever. And then Kevin was talking about the power that they have with Rotten Tomatoes in being a sort of front door. Like, you can't be the front door that Roku is, or that, the Sony device behind me is, but you get the opportunity with Rotten Tomatoes to be a front door, a starting place for people who are trying to figure out what to watch. And you've turned that into, in part, it's part of the Fandango ecosystem and Vudu ecosystem of being able to sell content. And our customer, Sensical, which is a OTT service started by Common Sense Media. That's, for me as a parent of young kids, was a starting place to figure out what was acceptable content for my kids to watch. And they took that sort of brand equity they had, and this is Eric Berger, who used to run Crackle, so I think he knows the OTT stuff pretty well. They launched this service on the back of that, and it's great. It's got this kind of unique parent type of user experience as well for me to kind of see what the kids are watching and stuff. And so there's opportunities to kind of build on what your place is in the ecosystem and get a bigger hold in OTT, even if you're not HBO Max or Disney Plus.
Yeah, you raise a really interesting point, though, and that is, well, Sensical is that, and it is truly an interesting kind of offering that Common Sense has pulled together. It is advertising supported, and so in that, as they move forward, while it's very attractive right at the moment, there's still a certain level of importance as far as what as parents really want their kids to be able to see. These kinds of programming efforts are nothing new. Channel One over the last 30 years has been doing that in the distribution of content to schools around. And one of the biggest challenges they had was the advertising component. So, while it's free and while it's there, this is still an innate part of human behavior, particular parents' behavior, in making sure that their kids aren't exposed to the wrong kind of advertising. But you raise a really interesting point, and that is, niche programming. And this is coming back to Jeff and what he was looking at too when it comes to this kind of programming, the future of OTT and where we're going. We're talking entertainment, we're talking media, we're talking advertising, we're talking these kinds of outreach, which is what we all do. Yet, what has been happening over the course of the last 36, 48 months has been an explosion of engagement from houses of worship. That in and of itself is OTT. It's programming, it's engagement. So that's shifting over. And corporate, of all things, Salesforce is about ready to launch their own Salesforce channel that's going to have engaged in their educational components, sales support. Is this where we're going with the future of OTT? Is that it's going to be all in one location to be able to go and receive your education, your corporate training, your product outreach, and, oh, by the way, we're going to have a little bit of entertainment thrown in there. Is that the new direction that OTT is going? Open question.
Well, when I'm looking at research, and maybe Brett, you can speak to this as well. What I'm seeing is that, while a third of people are searching for entertainment, a third of people are looking for interest-based content, and it's becoming more sort of niche. There's more of this sort of niche view that people are taking. I think there are going to be the big five, but we're also seeing that people are really interested in cooking is a huge market, right, of interest-based content.
It's second only to adult, just so you
know. True crime, there's a lot of interest-based content that people are seeking. And as I'm looking at how some of these larger services are programming, their front door into their service, it's very interest-based. You see the stack of programming, and it's very watch all your true crime here, watch your documentaries here. Are you interested in music documentaries? Here you go. So, I mean, that's sort of what I'm seeing sort of trending in the marketplace, is that the audiences are seeking that niche interest-based content.
Yeah, and if they can get it,
and that's part of what we're, that's part of the problem that we're trying to solve. We're saying to a consumer, there's maybe 10 episodes of a cooking show on a service. We're saying we're going to give you 10 services that have 100 episodes, so you can dive deep into food if you'd like.
So I want to take that for just a second while I can remember.
Sorry, Brett. I know you're trying to say something, Brett. I apologize.
I don't want to jump in here. But what I was saying is if they can get it, and we've talked about subscription, we've talked about where OTT is going when it comes to FAST, when it comes to advertising supported. One thing that's become very apparent during the course of the last year is the fact that many lower social economic families and homes around America and around different parts of the world just don't have access to those kinds of networks to be able to actually view this content that we're talking about. When that starts being addressed, we have an infrastructure bill here in the United States that we're looking at being able to build this out, the rural networks, schools, families that have this kind of programming, they want it, but they can't afford the cost of what the network is to be able to engage. This is going to grow the market considerably. This is where advertising, what television used to be, sports, all this kind of engagement is going to become very real on all kinds of devices. Brett, what are you finding when it comes to this kind of expansion in the networks? You know, we've got a lot of hoopla around 5G. 5G is very cool in stadiums. I mean, that's a whole other subject matter in and of itself. But what are you finding where the greater need is to be able to help OTT expand itself? Most everybody that's got content already gets it. They already subscribe to it. They already have it. It's the homes that can't afford it.
Well, if you're talking about accessibility, I think there are continued initiatives not only in the US, but worldwide in terms of trying to drive faster broadband speeds down to consumers so they get access to these things.
Yeah, but we pay the most for broadband and we have the worst broadband comparatively to different parts of the world.
And for that reason, I think there are things like satellite that will pay TV that will continue to be necessary, which will probably prevent Dish and DirecTV from perhaps declining. Everyone talks about how that's a dying area. I think because you can't necessarily get as much content as you want out in the hinterlands, that's probably going to keep them alive for a while. But at the same time, technology is making it easier for you to stream over a smaller pipe. So I think people are able to get that. And then when you start talking about mobile networks, that really kind of brings that back up. But one of the things that Lauren was talking about related to what you were mentioning, Lauren, was about the, it really speaks to the type of content that's going to be in demand in the future. Mm-hmm. So you talk about cooking. How many of us have gone to YouTube to find out how to fix something on your car or in your house or something like that? That's there are exactly. And so that's a huge area, and it's advertising based. We're going to see, if you start looking out 10 years into the future at what streaming looks like, now you start looking at things like what's going to happen with mobile, what's going to happen with the types of content, what happens when you get the people that are under age 20 are now 30, and the people that are 20 now, that are 30 are now 40. You shift that 10 years into the future. What are they watching? Where are they spending their time? And that's on social media, user-generated content. Yeah, I remember whenever Tosh.0 was first on TV, and it was like, oh my gosh, she's got internet stuff on television. Well, who thought of that? And now it's like, that's old school compared to what we're seeing all the time. In fast channels, we're starting to add that in there. So I think we're seeing this evolution of what content is going to be like, driven by consumers and what they want to see. And so the how that's presented and monetized and really integrated together into an experience, we're really struggling as an industry in terms of how all of those pieces, particularly user-generated, comes together. Because your user-generated viewing is so personalized that I think that is a big hurdle. I think it's going to be overcome, but I think when you start looking 10 and more years out at where OTT is going, you're going to be looking at some really unique ways that services are going to be offered and the types of content that consumers are going to be able to get.
You know, I'm just going to kind of stay with that. I don't see it that far out. I see it 2 to 3 years out. Because the evolution of the marketplace and the viewer interest in having this kind of engagement. And I want to kind of go to Jeff, you know, and in fact, because you brought up sponsorship, which is fantastic. And, you know, yeah, Old Spice, and, you know, there's some pretty funny ones out there, but you also brought up how-to videos. Are you looking at any, I mean, first of all, funny how-to videos would be pretty funny, but in this particular case, you know, have you been having any flirtations from any like Bosch dishwashers or any kind of consumer goods that have been interested in coming in and sponsoring any kind of programming that would be in this genre, in this self-help environment?
The answer to that is yes, and it's interesting because the how-to comedy videos is on our roadmap, like that's on our short because nice. What it does, it will open us up to more sponsors, like kind of what you're referencing is the whole how-to videos. So that's on our short map, and we have had inbounds from products regarding that, but we're developing right now a whole how-to series.
Yeah, I'm just curious about that because to Mike's point, it's like viewers want this. This is where they go to, online to try to find this kind of, and if you can combine that with some sort of programming metaphor of some sort, I think it's truly, it's a no-brainer. But it comes to sports, it comes to training, it comes to coaching, it comes to these kinds of programming engagements brought forth to create community. That seems to be happening within the future of OTT, is community-centric viewing. We talked a little bit about house of worships. I mean, that in and of itself is a massive market that they have been building right at the moment. Corporate, big time streaming and education. So this what the goal of this kind of what we've been looking at here is, what is the future of OTT? We could talk about the viewers, we could talk about the audience growth, we can talk about advertising, but have we stepped over now, and are we now in a fully engaged video environment that this is how we receive not only entertainment, but our education and our social engagement? Is it now past, is OTT the way of the future, not what the future is? Who's going to jump on that?
Sometimes I hear a version of this question about where are we in the sort of life cycle of OTT, if I can turn your question into that.
Fair enough.
And I think sometimes the people say, well, look, we're already delivering the streams to everywhere. Like, that's solved. Delivery is solved. And yet we've spent a good portion of this summer talking about hiccups in delivery in some of the most marquee services out there, right? We don't have delivery, I don't think, perfected across the board with the perfect user experience for the right individual with the right content, the right ad experience, the right targeted ads, the right monetization for the content owner. There's like a lot more we could do in delivery. And then there's a lot more we can do in some of the things we were talking earlier about in terms of perfecting the way we run our businesses. Like, everybody's doing OTT because they have a business objective. That's why Jeff's here, that's why Lauren's here, and so forth, and Kevin. So what are we doing to evolve the way we process information and make decisions to make the most of this OTT opportunity, right? Getting data back in and that sort of thing. And then the last piece, I think what the future is the extending. So we're doing, how do we quickly, nimbly take advantage of new opportunities? Like, we weren't even talking about FAST a year and a half ago. And that's arguably like the hottest topic in the OTT ecosystem right now, at least in the Americas, right?
But Mike, just to address that, AVOD has been around since the get-go of VOD.
Yeah.
So this is a different acronym, right?
No, I don't agree with that, actually. I think that the virtual linear channels that are lean back experiences where the consumer is acting somewhat lazily like they did with legacy cable TV, and they're just consuming hours and hours of taste-made cooking shows where they used to maybe watch the Food Network on like Comcast. That's kind of new. I mean, it's, I don't know, 2-3 years new, but in the Brightcove customer world, like, they're caring about their OTT experiences, and they're caring about how much money they're making on all the places that Jeff named earlier, including Samsung TV Plus and Pluto and Zumo and so forth. So the next wave of that, people are going to want to be early, the way Cheddar was early on FAST and got a bunch of attention for it.
Yeah, well, you've just touched an area that I built back in the late 80s, early 90s, and as far as a cooking environment, it just happened. It wasn't streaming; it was, download to burn. So the interest of that kind of content has always been there for viewers. And your point is well taken with life cycle of consumer and viewer engagement and where we're going and how we're going. And I think what it comes down to is what can be afforded. The networks in and of themselves, broadband's expensive to deliver. As far as being able to engage with it or subscribe to it as a viewer at home. There used to be 3-4 subscriptions services. Now it's 7, 8 because the prices have been driven. Disney Plus was a tremendous strategy of bringing it in at $4.99 versus $9.99. The growth of this has come into being able to have access to the kind of content effectively and efficiently as possible on whatever device that you may be able to engage it with. That's where affordability comes into play. And where we're seeing right at the moment is 2 components that are very key, and that is fast advertising as well as I believe that Struum has merit here when it comes to credit-based, pay one subscriber fee and be able to have access to content that you may want to engage with. I think that you're onto something, Warren, that I believe is something of strong interest in moving our industry forward in the future of OTT.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Allan. Yeah, like when we look at our pricing, our monthly subscription price right now is at $4.99. It's competitive to the marketplace, but really the value that we're providing is the ability to access all these different channels, right? So you can access 60 different channels that if you had them as individual subscriptions, it would cost you hundreds of dollars, right? So, we really do, to your earlier point, providing the access to people so they can really watch all of this different content for an affordable price is really a key component of our business. It's almost like the sort of a little bit of the democratization of these streaming services, where we are taking these sort of aspirational tier ones, the medium to long tail, and sort of putting them, providing the front door to a consumer to go search and discover, to have, to be able to access all of that different content.
Yeah, I think Lauren, you make a great point. I think one of the other points I wanted to tack on with what Mike was talking about delivery and being an important thing. There's another D, and you touched on it a little bit. It's discovery, and yeah. I don't think that the aggregation is so much about the economic accessibility as much as it is convenience and availability. And so, I mean, to that point, there's as a lot of content providers put things behind walled gardens, the aspect of discovery and searching and finding and trying to figure out the complicated maze of what is windowed, when and where is it, why is it on Netflix this week but gone the next week, and then it's on HBO Max and then it's here. Look, to that point, we talked about, I'll try and pull this home for you, Allan, and you can close up about TVOD and if it's still alive and how it lives with SVOD. Last year alone was the biggest year in the history of TVOD. And as you all recall, there was not a lot of new release content. So consumers were digging deep from a transactional standpoint into their pocket and looking at catalog titles and doing that, I think largely because one, they knew it's available at a place. It was available at our service on Vudu with 200,000 plus titles, but they probably got fatigued looking around to figure out where they could find it. And it was easier to buy it than it was to search through 6 different services.
And I think that is a great place to probably close this up on, and that is personalization and where we're going and how the service, whatever it may be, serves up the kind of content that the viewer is interested in. And we're fortunate right here to be able to have each of you have a different component, but an overriding crossover to be able to touch the consumer and the viewer in itself. Mike, your platform, your expertise in being able to bring the viewer effectively and efficiently is key. But poor performance, poor functionality doesn't work. I mean, it just doesn't work. Anybody watch HBO Max lately? It's a tough platform when there's a viewing behavior that's constricted and accessing the content. Models, Struum, Lauren, your strength in being able to provide your audience with options at an affordable price is critical, and that's the future. Kevin, what you've been touching base with, the ability to be able to see what you would like to see versus dragging everybody out to the theater, which of course, is coming back, but still the behavior is there, is exceptional and is the direction of where OTT is going. And Jeff, you're being able to touch multiple different types of communities affordably, with good, strong entertainment, and being able to engage that community and deliver good, compelling commercial offerings when it comes to your advertisers and your sponsors is where we're going. And if we combined all of this, we'd be looking at the future of OTT, efficiencies, effective economics, and also engagement. I'd like to thank everybody on this panel. We're at that time. We do have some questions. I hope we've been able to answer them from the viewing audience, but Eric?
Yeah, thanks so much. There are a couple questions left. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thanks so much, Allan, for running such a great conversation. Thanks, everyone, for such great contributions. Thanks to the audience for your questions. Speaking of the audience, we do have a winner for the $50 Amazon gift card, and that is Abigail Liu. Abigail, I believe you've been at every one of these Streaming Media Connect sessions. So thanks for joining us, and look in your email for information about that Amazon gift card. I'd like to thank Brightcove again for sponsoring this particular panel, and I'd like to thank the Limelight Networks for sponsoring all of Streaming Media Connect. Thanks again to everyone, and I hope to see as many of you as possible in Huntington Beach in the beginning of November for Streaming Media West. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.